This is the Blaze Radio on demand.
Individuals and businesses with tax problems, listen carefully. If you owe over $10,000 in back taxes or have unfiled tax returns, we can help you take back control. The IRS is the largest and most aggressive collection agency in the world, and they can seize your bank account, garnish your paycheck, close your business, and file criminal charges. Take control of your tax problems now by calling the experts at Tax Mediation Services
at 800-600-1645. That's 800-600-1645. 800-600-1645.
You're listening to the Jacki Daily Show. Join us online on Facebook and on Twitter at Jacki Daily Show, and you can hear the shows on demand anytime you like, 24/7 on iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, or Google Play Music, assuming you're not listening on The Blaze, Sundays from 1 to 3. All right, you might not know that some states actually invest in their oil and gas industry. I'm always talking about keeping the United States competitive. And, I think really it's the first responsibility of the states. Frankly, in this country, we don't have a national energy policy. You've got about 14 agencies that make law, that govern energy and the environment. You got about 17 congressional committees that oversee energy. But the truth is that a lot of what happens really happens at the state level. We trust the states to appropriately regulate the industry. And some states take responsibility for encouraging robust energy production by basically supporting the industry. I did not know until recently that the state of Texas actually invests, and I mean directly invests, in energy production, such that there is a program in the state of Texas where the states can provide support to energy producers. I'm talking about people who are producing oil and gas, and they invest money to give them the resources that they need. And apparently for every dollar that the state of Texas invests in oil and gas, supporting their operators, they get back between $6 and $24 of new revenue for the state budget. Let me tell you, that's a really, really good deal. I used to work on Capitol Hill. I don't know if I've ever heard of such a thing on Capitol Hill. Do we have any programs at the federal level that provide a return like that? I mean, most of the time they're big losers. Most state programs are just lost causes. The money is down a rat hole and it's never coming back. You can't even hope for a return. Maybe you could argue that student loans provide a return over time, but as we know, there's a high rate of default there too, and the payback is slow. But in this case, this is apparently an excellent program that is run through the Bureau of Economic Geology, the BEG, and that is directed by Dr. Scott Tinker, the state geologist of Texas. You might remember that Dr. Tinker was on the show once before because he has a really cool film that you can find online, which tries to answer the question, can the planet transition from traditional fuels or fossil fuels, now I'm talking about coal, oil, natural gas, to renewables, let's say solar, let's say wind, or biomass. And Dr. Tinker, was it called Switch the Movie? Is that the name of the film?
Just Switch, yes.
Switch, yes. So you can find it. What's the website? Because I want them to check that out if they have a chance.
Switch Energy Project.
Switch Energy Project. Just Google that. It'll take you right to it. It's just packed with answers for all the questions you've been asking about whether or not it's realistic to move from fossil fuels to renewables. But for today, different topic with Dr. Tinker, since he's heading up the BEG, again, the Bureau of Economic Geology, the state geologist of Texas. I'm going to ask you, Dr. Tinker, to explain to us exactly what it is that you're trying to get the state legislature to do this year in terms of supporting energy production, whether through the STARR program, which is the one I just described, where you actually invest, put money into the industry and get money back. But I know there's other things that are on your agenda or priority list for appropriations. Tell us what you're after this session.
Sure. And, the Bureau of Economic Geology sounds like this ancient name because it is. We were formed in 1909, and it brings to mind dusty halls and cobwebs, but actually it's one of the most modern technological organizations around, and we do science related to energy all over the world, and especially in Texas. We've got 275 people there, engineers and scientists and economists. And one of the big programs that we run for the state of Texas is called STARR. It's an acronym, stands for the State of Texas Advanced Resource Recovery Program. The state puts money into the Bureau, and it allows our teams to work with operators in Texas, oil and gas operators, usually fairly small, that may not have that kind of research team of their own. And we help them understand their reservoirs and their regional plays. And they produce more oil and gas as a result of that. And that brings royalties and severance taxes to the state. So for every dollar that the state of Texas puts into the STARR program, we give back a 6x to 18x multiple, depending on the particular budgetary year and the price of oil and gas. So this year is a very tough budget year. The state loves the Bureau and this program, but they're trying to figure out how they can fund it. And right now, that's quite a struggle going on in the House and the Senate. And we're hopeful that they find a way to support this program and bring revenue to Texas.
No question. And I'm looking on a chart which shows the return that you get for each dollar that you put into various shale plays. And it's showing as high as 24 times, which is Yates Gulf of Mexico. So that's quite a return. And, other states look to Texas sort of as the envy of states because you have this amazing rainy day fund. And when energy prices are good, revenues are really great. So I'd have a difficult time understanding why the legislators would even need to be convinced. I mean, yours should be a no-brainer. The STARR program should be a no-brainer. So are you hitting with any resistance at the State House?
Well, it's interesting. When the budget's tight like it is, Jackie, they have lots of competing programs, and whether it's education or schools, or, kids, or health care programs, or a variety of other things, there's a big demand on the budgets, and they're all important. So the legislators are trying to balance as best they can, and I wouldn't say there's any resistance in the sense, but it's really a matter of trying to find a budget when Texas can't print money like the federal government. They can't go into debt, so it actually has to balance that budget. And the Senate and the House are quite far apart on how to do that. So I would say the tension is there in trying to figure out where the source of funding will come from.
Right. Okay, so I'm going to, by the way, we've been talking with Scott Tinker. He's the director of the Bureau of Economic Geology and the state geologist of Texas. And also in the studio with me is Margaret Graham. She's the president of MPG Petroleum, Inc. She, too, has been on the show before, so she's a repeat offender. And the first time, you can find the interview. It's called Lady Wildcatter in the House. There are not many lady wildcatters or lady operators out there that I've met. I've been to lots of oil and gas conferences, and Margaret is one of the very few trailblazers that I have met so far. And so she's been kind enough to return because, Margaret, I want to ask you, because I know you're a passionate defender of the STARR program that we just described. Why is this program important to you as an operator in Texas?
Well, first, I'd just like to say thanks for having me on the show again.
Of course.
And it's an honor to be on the show with Dr. Scott Tinker,
of
the
course,
state geologist of Texas, and we're schoolmates from Trinity University.
Very cool.
When Scott sent a message out to announce that we were facing some serious budget cuts that would impact the Bureau of Economic Geology, and particularly Project STARR, it raised my eyebrows immediately because I happen to be one of the beneficiaries of Project STARR through a project that we call the Pearl Prospect. And very generously, MPG Petroleum has been supported through the resources of Project STARR in terms of every particular specialty in geoscience that one might find in the staff of a major oil company. So it allows us to take a concept-type project and get it off the drafting table and into a position that it is drillable and fundable. So I think without the help of the Bureau of Economic Geology and all the fine scientists there, this project may never have been drilled, and we're not quite yet there, but it certainly has been de-risked to a large extent. And anytime I've shown this project to a potential funding source, almost everyone has been extremely impressed by the amount of work that's been done and all of the questions that have been answered and checked off, so that ahead of the drill bit, we've just de-risked it as much as possible to prevent loss. One thing I'd like to say is the whole reason we have a budgetary problem with the state is the price of oil.
Right. Yeah. Let's call the House of Sod and tell them to get on that, But no, really, I mean, at least that's going to look, is improving, or the outlook is improving. It seems every oil and gas conference I go to now, there's sort of this optimism this year that you didn't have last year for sure. And uniformly held expectations can sometimes be self-fulfilling. So hopefully things are looking better for this year as opposed to years past.
I'm beginning to see some optimism out there, and you are seeing a little more activity, equipment being deployed out in the field, and people getting back to work. But it is a slow recovery, and it's interesting. I don't think this happens in very many industries, but it is actually the success of the oil and gas industry at bringing on new reserves to the market, which has actually caused the punishment of the oil and gas industry and decline in prices through a increase in supply over and above demand. And so it's an interesting thing. You do a good job, and instead of being rewarded for it, it actually creates a backlash. And of course, all of the outflow from that are loss of jobs, loss of income to the state in terms of revenues not trickling down from people having good-paying jobs in the oil and gas industry who go out and spend money at Walmart and the grocery store and buy new cars and things like that. So it is more important than just to the people that are directly involved in oil and gas. It actually is extremely impactful to the economy of the state in whole.
We're talking to Margaret Graham, and she's the president of MPG Petroleum, Inc., and also Dr. Scott Tinker, who is the director of the Bureau of Economic Geology and the state geologist of Texas. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll continue this conversation. You're listening to The Jacki Daily Show. You're listening to The Jacki Daily Show, and we're continuing the conversation with Dr. Scott Tinker, and he is the state geologist here in Texas, and also Margaret Graham, and she is the president of MPG Petroleum, Inc. And specifically, we're talking about the STARR program, whereby the Bureau of Economic Geology, or that particular agency, works to invest and support energy producers like Margaret's company. And for every dollar that goes in, Texans get between $6 and $24 back into the state coffers, which is amazing. And that is up for consideration before the legislature. And in addition, there's a whole lot more that the Bureau of Economic Geology does. And Dr. Tinker, I know that people up here in northern Texas are interested in the monitoring of seismic activity. Specifically, we're talking about earthquakes in relation to oil and gas production. I know that your agency is on that and has invested a lot of time and money to actually monitor and learn about what's going on. What can you tell us, or what's the status of the TexNet seismic equipment?
Sure, Jackie, and let me bring that around from what we were talking about before the break. The STARR program is really a neat partnership between the state, the University of Texas, and the Bureau of Economic Geology, and operators in Texas. They all work together to do their part. The state invests, the Bureau helps do research, the operators operate and produce, and it brings money back to Texas that can be spent on other things. So I love working in those partnerships to solve big problems. TexNet is a very analogous thing. The state of Texas put close to $5 million last biennium into the Bureau to purchase 58 new seismometers and put them all around Texas, and we have a dozen of them deployed right around the Irving, Azle area in Texas now. And we formed this group of researchers to study that seismicity and understand the potential causes of that, whether it's natural or potentially induced by activities. And so that is a state investment. We've been working hard for the last 2 years to do that, and the industry has stepped up to the plate. We have a consortium called the Center for Integrated Seismicity Research, funded by 13 companies now that are bringing data and knowledge. They have great data, and they're very interested in making sure that they operate in the best way possible. So they're putting money and data in, and people. University is, the state is investing in that, and also working closely with the Railroad Commission so that everybody understands and learns about this challenge. And it's not hydraulic fracturing like people might think if you were to watch other forms of news besides the Jacki Daily show.
Right.
but the disposal of large volumes of produced water over time in an area near a natural geologic fault has the potential to cause that natural fault to move sooner than it would have otherwise. And we've seen that in Oklahoma and a few places in Texas. So the goal is to make sure when we're permitting and putting away the produced water from the oil wells that it's done in a way that spreads out the volumes, puts them at multiple depths in the geologic window there, and manages that water and that pressure through time. It's very doable, and everybody's interested in solving and addressing that problem. So again, another state, industry, academic partnership that I think is going in great directions.
We're talking with Dr. Scott Tinker. He is your state geologist who runs the Bureau of Economic Geology, and also Margaret Graham, who's with MPG Petroleum. So, Margaret, I know that this is all important to you as an operator who's been supported by the STARR program at the BEG. So tell everybody where they can find out more about this and what they can do to be supportive.
Well, as you know, politicians generally respond to the people they represent. So a letter writing campaign would be a wonderful thing to do. The budget is the House Bill number 1, and the Bureau of Economic Geology's line item is under item 3. I have been in conversation with Naomi Miller, who is the district director for the Speaker of the House, Joe Strauss. She's been a wonderful resource. The person who takes care of the House Budget Appropriations Committee, the clerk, her name is Emily Howell.
So bombard Emily Howell is what you're saying. That's what you're saying.
She is the Appropriations Committee clerk, and you can
Poor Ms. Howell.
You can Google her under the Texas House, find her, and do an email and letter writing campaign to let people know that you feel that it is very important that the money is spent in areas that actually turn around and help the state have more money. So rather than cutting our own source of revenues, this is an investment which is one that actually pays.
Thank you, Margaret Graham. Thank you, Dr. Scott Tinker. You're listening to the Jacki Daily Show.